So Capital City is a book about urban planning in a time when real estate controls the majority of the world's assets. So I'm going to give a couple of statistics that I use in the beginning of the book. Global real estate is now worth $217 trillion, just kind of unfathomably large, but if you think of all the gold that's ever been mined, it's 36 times that value. It is a majority of the world's assets. 60% of the world's capital is in real estate. And real estate means a lot of different things, but 3/4 of those investments are just housing. So housing, and especially urban housing, is a huge part of capital's global growth strategy. That has all sorts of effects on cities. US homeownership right now is at a 50-year low. So a couple years ago, a record high of 37% of home sales were to absentee investors. Blackstone, the private equity firm, is now the largest landlord in the world. Average move-in rents, so the rent that landlords charge when people move in, have more than doubled over the last 2 decades, while, as we know, wages are pretty much stagnant. So that means that the rent burden, the percentage of your income that you pay to rent, has been going up and up and up. And it's especially true in segregated neighborhoods. So around the country, rent burdens in black neighborhoods average 44%. So 44% of income is going to rent. In Latino neighborhoods, it's 48%. In New York City, every month, more than 2 million people give over more than half of their income to their landlord. So that's a huge transfer of capital from one kind of capitalist to another that's not going to workers. So the force behind that trend, I'm arguing, is the growing centrality and concentration of capital into real estate. And what I'm asking with this book is, what does it do to urban planning? Urban planning being the process through which we shape our cities. And I'm going to admit to being a little nervous right now, so I'm going to read the next section, which tries to make that connection. The force behind these trends is the growing centrality of urban real estate to capital's global growth strategy. Through this process, the price of land becomes a central economic determinant and a dominant political issue. The clunky term gentrification becomes a household word and displacement an everyday fact of life. Housing becomes a globally traded financial asset, creating the conditions for synchronized bubbles and crashes. Government, particularly at the municipal level, becomes increasingly obsessed with raising property values and redistributing wealth upward through land and rents. Real estate developer Donald Trump becomes first a celebrity and ultimately a president. Taken together, we witness the rise of the real estate state, a political formation in which real estate capital has inordinate influence over the shape of our cities, the parameters of our politics, and the lives we lead. The real estate state is not new, nor is it all-encompassing. Like the carceral state, the welfare state, the warfare state, the administrative state, it's an expression of government, a component, a block, a manifestation, a tendency that has been around in one form or another for as long as states and private property have coexisted. Landlords have been determining the shape of cities for centuries, and the idea of housing as a commodity, even as a financial asset, is not exactly state-of-the-art. What is relatively new, however, is the outsized power of real estate interests within the capitalist state. As real estate values have risen to absurd heights, so has the political force of real estate capital. The real estate state is a feature of government at all levels, from the hyperlocal to the global. It is most firmly grafted onto municipal governments, however, because that's where most of the capitalist state's planning is done, physical planning, that is. City planners therefore sit uncomfortably at the center of this maelstrom. Planners manage the levers of urban change and make crucial decisions about land use, transportation, housing, the environment, and more. Though most people have no idea what they actually do, planners have an immense impact on both capitalists and workers in cities and suburbs. In most places, planners are tasked with the contradictory goals of inflating real estate values while safeguarding residents' best interests. Capitalism never made planning easy. Organized money could always thwart the best-laid plans. But today's urban planners face an existential crisis. If the city is an investment strategy, are they just wealth managers? This book is about planners in cities run by real estate. It describes how real estate came to rule and what planners do under these circumstances. Planners provide a window into the practical dynamics of urban change, the way the state both uses and is used by organized capital, and the power of landlords and developers at every level of government. They also possess some of the powers we must deploy if we ever wish to reclaim our cities from real estate capital. Understanding planners is an important way to understand the capitalist state, how it is built, and what it would take to dismantle it. I'm going to skip forward ahead to the thing that actually got me to write this book in the first place, which was this observation. A private land market is essentially a spoils system. Whoever owns the land keeps the accrued benefits, whether or not the owner is responsible for them. Until land is socially controlled, those who possess property, capital, and access to power will shape planning priorities. With so much global capital invested into real estate, planners are facing enormous pressure to stoke land markets and enable gentrification. Their charge is to find creative ways to raise property values, either because they are low and landowners want them higher, or because they are already high and city budgets will fail if they start to fall. Any seemingly technical discussions of growth, density, and urban form are always also shaped by this imperative. Planners are not just shills to real estate, though. They can and generally want to make spaces more beautiful, sustainable, efficient, and sociable. But without control over the land, the result of their work is often higher land prices, increased rents, and ultimately displacement. And to skip ahead one more time, I wrote this book for anyone who is frustrated with both the directions their cities are taking and the alternatives planners are offering. I put planners at the center of the story because they are uniquely positioned at the nexus of state, capital, and popular power. On their own, however, planners cannot unwind real estate's grip over our politics. For that, we will need organized people, mass movements to remake our cities from the ground up and gain control over our homes and lives. That's what I'm arguing in the book, that real estate has become inordinately powerful. The state has been reorganized to promote it, and it's going to take organized people to challenge it. The first chapter looks at the history of urban planning and the rise of the profession of planning and how real estate came to take over more and more of a role within it. Second chapter looks at how gentrification works and what planners have to do with it. The third is a case study of New York City in the 21st century, which is really convenient because we had this billionaire technocrat conservative type, and then we had this populist liberal type, and they're different in a lot of ways, but their planning apparatus is remarkably similar, and their approach to land and housing shares quite a bit. The next chapter looks at the history of the Trump family, which is, again, convenient that we have this real estate developer in the White House. And I knew that Trump was a real estate developer. I knew that his father was too. I didn't realize until someone left a comment on one of my Jacobin articles that Trump's father's father was also a real estate speculator. And so then I looked at all three of them, and I realized that their history tracked perfectly with the history I told in the first chapter about the rise and change in urban planning. So the fourth chapter looks at that transformation, really just using the Trumps as an example. They're like loud and obnoxious, but they're not abnormal, except that he's the president. And then the fifth chapter looks at what we can do. It lists a number of policies that would be perfectly legal right now, but we're not doing. And so that means then that we have to have a political movement that could capture them. I talk about the principles that I think could guide that movement and where the current strengths of that movement lie.